Chapter 883. Shen Yan thought that if she didn't really care about him, how could she be so happy just because of a small title? In the years that followed, he had wondered more than once what kind of different life he would have had if he hadn't met his sister that afternoon. He didn't dare to think about it because at that time, he already had something that he couldn't lose. At that time, he was just a young man who suddenly felt the warmth that others brought to him. He was so surprised that he was a little hesitant. He was afraid that all of this was just a blurry dream. When he woke up, he would still find himself lying in that dark and damp house, surrounded by cold yellow walls, and not the warmth that he could touch now. Gu Shengyin felt his hand being held tightly all of a sudden. The force was very strong, as if the owner of the hand was trying to grab onto something. Her skin was naturally much more tender than ordinary people's, so this kind of strength was enough to make her feel pain. However, Gu Shengyin didn't care about this. Instead, she frowned and looked at Shen Yan worriedly. "What's wrong, Xiao Yan?" Shen Yan held her hand tightly and shook his head slightly. He was now a head shorter than Gu Shengyin. Seeing that he didn't speak, Gu Shengyin didn't ask. She just rubbed his half-dry hair with her other hand. "Okay, let's go down and eat." Because Gu Shengyin had specially ordered that the dishes tonight were extra rich. During this time, Gu Shengyin kept putting food into Shen Yan's bowl. She wanted to make up for all the nutrients that he had lost over the years. A 13-year-old child looked like a 10-year-old. Shen Yan silently looked at the mountain of food in his bowl and tried to hold back the sour feeling in his nose. Ever since her mother had left, no one had ever picked up food for her during her meal. He silently ate his rice and thought for a while. Then, he picked up a piece of braised pork trotter and put it in Gu Shengyin's bowl. He blushed and said, "Sister, eat too." Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment, then she smiled and said, "Thank you, Xiao Yan. Let's eat together." Shen Yan was actually very full, but there was still a lot of food in his bowl. Gu Shengyin had already put down her chopsticks. Seeing him like this, she suddenly said, "If you're full, don't continue. Be careful of eating too much and making your stomach uncomfortable." Her heart really ached for Shen Yan, but she was also extremely glad that she had met him so early. Otherwise, who knew how much suffering he would have to suffer alone? Shen Yan obediently put down his chopsticks. He looked at the food and felt a little reluctant. Gu Shengyin misunderstood what he meant and thought that he liked to eat it. She quickly said, "Xiao Yan likes it? If you like it, I'll ask Nanny Chang to continue doing it tomorrow." Shen Yan shook his head and said softly, "No, it's just that I can't bear to waste the food my sister gave me." Gu Shengyin felt a lump in her throat. She took a sip of water to cover it up and looked at Shen Yan reproachfully. "If I give you a big plate of food, will you really eat it all?" This child was really too lovable. At this moment, Nanny Chang came to clean up the table. When she saw Gu Shengyin's bowl, she began to nag. "Miss, I've told you a few times. You have to eat less braised pork trotter. You have a big stomach. If you eat it, you'll feel uncomfortable at night." Gu Shengyin interrupted Nanny Chang's nagging and said with a smile, I know. I only ate one piece. I'll go for a walk later. I'll be fine." Shen Yan was taken aback. He saw very clearly that Gu Shengyin had been eating vegetarian dishes. The only piece of pork trotter was given to her by him. Chapter 884. Shen Yan lowered his head and tried his best to suppress the warmth that surged from the bottom of his heart. It felt good to be cherished and cared for. After dinner, the two of them walked in the garden outside for half an hour. Then, they sat on the sofa in the living room and watched TV together. Shen Yan liked this feeling very much. It was clearly the first time he and his sister had met today, but in this situation, it was as if the two of them were really a family who had always lived together. Gu Shengyin only watched for a while before she felt a little sleepy. Her body was really weak. In the past 10 years, her work and rest had been very normal. She had never slept past 10 o'clock at night. Shen Yan actually didn't pay attention to the TV. His mind had always been in a mess, and he didn't know what he was thinking. When he noticed that the breathing of the person beside him was getting lighter and lighter, he turned his head and saw Gu Shengyin leaning against the sofa with narrowed eyes. Shen Yan's gaze landed on Gu Shengyin's face and couldn't move away. He looked at her in a daze and felt that there was no one in this world who was more beautiful than his sister. There was no one better than his sister. In a daze, Gu Shengyin felt a warm body slowly leaning over. Then, slowly and hesitantly, he hugged her. This feeling wasn't bad. She moved slightly and sank into an even darker and sweeter dream. Shen Yan smiled foolishly for a while, then hugged Gu Shengyin's arm and fell asleep. When Mrs. Chang came over, she saw this scene. The TV in the living room was still on, but the adult and the child on the sofa had already fallen asleep. It was a very warm scene, but for some reason, Mrs. Chang's eyes suddenly turned sour. Didn't they look like two young beasts that had lost their protection huddling together and relying on each other for survival? Gu Shengyin woke up in her bed the next day. Her memory of last night was still stuck in the boring TV drama where the second male lead begged the female lead not to leave dejectedly. Needless to say, Mrs. Chang must have found her asleep on the sofa and sent her over. She paused. Shenyan? When Shenyan woke up, he was still in a daze. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the ceiling above his head. He blinked and turned around to look at the completely unfamiliar room. Finally, he realized where he was. He woke up at once. When he got up, he saw a set of clothes neatly placed beside the bed. From the coat to the underwear, it was obviously newly bought. Knowing that it was for him, he quickly changed his clothes and walked out of the room. He bumped into Gu Shengyin, who was coming out of her room. "Good morning, Xiao Nian." Gu Shengyin smiled when she saw him. Shen Yan couldn't help but smile back. "Good morning, sister." The two went out for a walk for half an hour. After breakfast, Gu Shengyin called GC. Due to the time difference, GC had just gotten off work and was eating dinner. "Cousin, I found myself a younger brother." Gu Shengyin's soft voice came out. GC flew back on the third day. He was a strict and self-disciplined person. Even here, he was still meticulously dressed in a suit and leather shoes, and his hair was neatly combed. His expression was a little serious as he looked at Gu Shengyin. "Do you know what you're doing? Adding another person to a family isn't just about adding another pair of chopsticks." Chapter 885. When he said this, he didn't hide it from Shen Yan. Shen Yan's hands clenched nervously as he looked at the man sitting opposite him. He looked very young, but his aura was very scary. This man was just sitting there, but the air around him seemed to condense with his cold and powerful gaze. No one could ignore his presence. Who was this man? Why could he interfere with his sister's decision? Shen Yan's mind was in a mess, but he looked at Gu Shengyin. At this moment, he was most concerned about his sister's answer. Gu Shengyin's expression became serious. It seemed that any frivolous attitude towards someone like GC was an insult to him. "Of course I know what I'm doing. I didn't adopt Xiao Nian on a whim. I've considered many things." She ended with one sentence. "No matter what the consequences are, I can bear it." GC didn't speak for a long time. His right hand slowly rubbed the left sleeve of his suit. Gu Shengyin knew that this was a habit of this man when he was thinking. He finally said, "Although I'm your legal guardian, you're already 16 years old. You can be responsible for your own actions. If this is your thought after careful consideration, then..." He glanced at Shen Yan, whose eyes were red because of Gu Shengyin's words. "I respect your opinion." Gu Shengyin smiled lightly. After all, Ling Su was still underage. If GC, as her guardian, didn't agree to this matter, adopting Shen Yan would undoubtedly become very difficult. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. GC acted very quickly. Once he confirmed that Shen Yan would become a member of this family, he began to arrange other things for him. This included Shen Yan's household registration, school, and future plans. He only stayed here for 3 days. 3 days later, one of his assistants came to the Ling family's mansion. The assistant was obviously a professional. After chatting with the two of them, he quickly made a series of plans. In the end, Shen Yan's household register still didn't move to Ling Su's side. This was GC's way of protecting his cousin. He didn't know what Shen Yan would become in the future, but he had to let him know that he shouldn't covet the Ling family's things. Gu Shengyin was initially unhappy, but Shen Yan stopped her. "I think this is good, sister." Although he didn't know much about these things, he vaguely knew that doing this would benefit Gu Shengyin. That was enough. Since Shen Yan had no objections, Gu Shengyin naturally did not insist. After everything was arranged, Gu Shengyin and Shen Yan finally became a family. Sister, I don't want to go to school. For the first time, Shen Yan, who had always been obedient, had an obvious resistance to something. Gu Shengyin, who had received the information transmitted by the system, naturally understood the reason. Shen Yan had received too much coldness and disdain in his previous school. But for a 13-year-old boy, school was the most suitable place for him. School is a good place. Trust me. Gu Shengyin patiently helped him tidy up his clothes. After thinking for a while, she said with a hint of yearning, Sister's wish has always been to go to school, but unfortunately, it hasn't been realized. Xiao Nian, can you help me make it happen? Shen Yan still had some resistance to that place, but if it was for his sister, it didn't matter if he did anything. Chapter 886. Tong Yuanyuan had heard that there was a home for stray animals here. It was said that the director of a veterinary hospital had set up a foundation by pulling in some social sponsors, specifically to adopt the homeless animals in Nashui. How could the soft-hearted and kind-hearted Tong Yuanyuan not come to such a place? She looked at herself in the mirror and carefully admired her outfit today. A white knee-length dress, a hat of the same color, and her long hair was loosely braided and hung softly on both sides of her neck. Very good, completely in line with the image of a pure and gentle girl. Tong Yuanyuan narcissistically spun around in front of the mirror. This outfit suited her very well and could set off her temperament very well. But, thinking of the place she was going to later, she frowned with some disgust. Those dirty cats and dogs would definitely dirty her dress. Looking at the gentle girl's expression in the mirror, she calmed her mind and let that face show a perfect smile, then left the room. Uncle Aunt, I'm going out first. I won't be home for lunch. She obediently said to the middle-aged man and woman in the living room. The two of them didn't raise their heads. Tong Yuanyuan bit her lips and went downstairs with a smile. A car was parked downstairs, and there were a man and two women in the car. The two of them were about the same age as Tong Yuanyuan. Looking at them, they should be students. One of the girls with sharp eyes immediately saw Tong Yuanyuan's red eyes. Yuanyuan, what happened to you? Did your cruel uncle and aunt bully you again? The girl said with a face full of indignation. Tong Yuanyuan hurriedly showed a smile. It's nothing, I was careless and sand got into my eyes when I went downstairs. In any case, this was a high-end residential area. How could there be sand? The girl said with indignation, Yuanyuan, you're too soft-hearted and kind-hearted. Who doesn't know how that family treats you? Tong Yuanyuan smiled awkwardly and lowered her head. The boy sitting in the driver's seat saw from the rearview mirror that Tong Yuanyuan's hands hanging by her sides were clenched. Obviously, she didn't care as much as she looked. Okay, we're going to see animals today. Did you all bring something? He changed the topic, and the girls instantly began to talk about it. Tong Yuanyuan sat quietly by the window with her eyes half closed. She looked very calm. It was easy for people to feel that such a girl was as gentle as water. She was such a beautiful girl, yet she had such a family of relatives who treated her so unfairly. Tong Yuanyuan had never mentioned in front of any of her classmates that her uncle and aunt were not good to her, but she was always able to let them know that she was not doing well. Therefore, whether it was her classmates or teachers, they all knew that Tong Yuanyuan had a pitiful background. After her parents passed away, she was taken in by her evil uncle and aunt. However, they were only greedy for the Tong family's wealth and were very harsh to their niece. In that kind of environment, she could still grow up to be so kind and gentle. It really made people feel pity for her. Therefore, Tong Yuanyuan was very popular in school. This time, it was also her idea to come to the stray animal nails. As expected, those people praised her again, saying that she was kind-hearted and so on. Chapter 887. Tong Yuanyuan was already numb to such compliments since she was young. These stupid people never cared about what was real and what was fake. She suddenly opened her eyes and glanced at the boy who was driving. Their class hunk, Qin Chuan, was handsome. More importantly, he came from a good family background. Tong Yuanyuan had always wanted to get close to him. To her, although Qin Chuan's looks were somewhat attractive, it was more because of his background. When she reached adulthood next year, her uncle and aunt would definitely not return her assets to her so easily. If she had a boyfriend with a strong family background, then this matter would be much simpler. However, in the past 6 months, no matter how much she hinted at it, Qin Chuan treated her the same as other girls. He didn't show any difference. Tong Yuanyuan was even a little discouraged. But this time, for some reason, when she suggested coming to the stray animal home, Qin Chuan, who had never liked such things, actually took the initiative to say that he had just reached adulthood. His family had bought a car for him to send them over. It was a pleasant surprise. Of course, Tong Yuanyuan politely rejected him. Then, under Qin Chuan's insistence, she accepted his kindness. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at Qin Chuan. The other party was so focused on driving that he didn't notice her. From Tong Yuanyuan's angle, she could see half of Qin Chuan's handsome side profile. Could it be that he suddenly agreed to this because of her? After all, she was a 17-year-old girl. No matter how anxious she was, Tong Yuanyuan still felt her face heat up. Her hand was suddenly grabbed by someone, and the girl sitting next to her winked at her. Tong Yuanyuan knew that she meant her and Qin Chuan. The girl quietly leaned over and asked, "Do you think Qin Chuan specially came over to be the chauffeur for you?" Tong Yuanyuan didn't confirm or deny it. She pretended to be angry and glared at her. She whispered, "Don't talk nonsense." However, her shy expression was completely different from what she said. Under Tong Yuanyuan's intentional or unintentional disclosure, the people around her knew that she liked Qin Chuan. Moreover, they felt that Qin Chuan was interested in her. Naturally, they didn't have any thoughts about Qin Chuan. Under such circumstances, if a girl confessed to Qin Chuan, they would think that she was shameless and stealing someone else's boyfriend. But in reality, Qin Chuan and Tong Yuanyuan had nothing to do with each other. She, Tong Yuanyuan, had the ability to make everyone think the way she wanted them to. Soon, they arrived at their destination. Unlike the dirty and messy environment they had expected, this place was surprisingly clean and tidy. This was a large courtyard located in the suburbs. As soon as he entered, he could see several different species of charmingly naive little guys playing with balls to amuse themselves. "Aya, are these stray cats and dogs? My snowball at home is also like this." A girl's eyes lit up when she saw this scene. The puppies were not afraid when they saw the strangers. Instead, they looked at them curiously. "So cute," the girl who had spoken earlier couldn't help but want to walk forward, but Tong Yuanyuan grabbed her hand. She didn't know why, but when she saw that this place was completely different from what she had imagined, she had a feeling that her plan had gone off track. Chapter 888. The girl looked at Tong Yuanyuan in confusion. "The animals here are all stray. Who knows if they've been vaccinated? If they get bitten?" Before she could finish her sentence, Tong Yuanyuan realized that something was wrong. This didn't sound like something the gentle and kind Tong Yuanyuan would say. Tong Yuanyuan was secretly angry at herself for being careless. Moreover, she could clearly feel that when she said this, Qin Chuan, who was standing at the side, glanced at her. "Don't worry, the animals here have all been sent to the veterinary hospital for a checkup and vaccinated." A gentle voice came from inside. A girl in a white dress walked out of the house. When she saw them, she revealed a friendly smile. Like Tong Yuanyuan, she was wearing a white dress. However, her dress was ankle-length, and the belt in the middle was gently tied, revealing her slim waist. Her waist-length hair was not tied up with anything, and she let it fall softly behind her ears. Her clean face was bare of makeup, but she had a beauty that was like a lotus in clear water. "What a beautiful person!" Tong Yuanyuan heard her companion exclaim softly. She looked at the girl with jealousy. Long dresses were usually a test of one's temperament. Even now, she didn't dare to try on long dresses. However, this girl was different. The ankle-length dress perfectly displayed her quiet and refreshing temperament. If the two of them were equally gentle, then when others saw Tong Yuanyuan, they might praise her and say, "What a quiet girl." However, when they saw Gu Shengyin, they could only sigh in amazement. Just by looking at her, they would feel their minds calm down. The sun shone on her fair face, giving her a peaceful feeling. Qin Chuan's eyes lit up when he saw Gu Shengyin. "Su Su," he called out to her. When Gu Shengyin saw this boy, she felt a little helpless. This boy named Qin Chuan was a relative of Principal Zhang. Ever since he came here with Principal Zhang, he kept finding excuses to come here. How could Gu Shengyin not see the meaning in his eyes when he looked at her? As a teenager, Gu Shengyin was very familiar with the appearance and temperament of this body of hers. She was definitely the type that could easily arouse the interest of men. Especially after Gu Shengyin's arrival, there was an additional skill that increased favorability. Gu Shengyin had clearly hinted that she had no other feelings for him, but this Qin Chuan didn't seem to have given up. And calling her Su Su. Since when were they so familiar with each other? Gu Shengyin smiled helplessly. Just as she was about to speak, she felt her hand being held by someone. "Are you close to my sister?" An arrogant and provocative male voice came from beside her, not giving Qin Chuan any face at all. Qin Chuan looked at the boy standing beside Gu Shengyin. He knew him. He was Su Su's younger brother. This child seemed to be very hostile towards him. Every time he saw him, he didn't have a good expression. Xin Yan held Gu Shengyin's hand tightly. In the past year, he had been well taken care of. Teenage boys were growing, so his height suddenly jumped. Now that he was 14 years old, he was almost as tall as Gu Shengyin, who was 1.67 meters tall. The advantage of his appearance was completely revealed. A 14-year-old boy had already received many love letters from blushing girls in school. Chapter 889. Shen Yan, who had a vague understanding of relationships between men and women, naturally knew how Qin Chuan felt about his sister. The thought of this man wanting to get close to his sister, wanting to hold her hand, wanting to hug her, and even wanting to kiss her. Shen Yan felt a surge of hostility from the bottom of his heart. How could his sister, who treated him the best in the world, become someone else's woman? Shen Yan couldn't bear the thought that one day in the future, she would treat others as well as she treated him without reservation. She could only be good to him. Qin Chuan sneered, "Little brat, you haven't weaned yet? You're already so old, yet you're still holding on to your sister and refusing to let go?" However, before Shen Yan could speak, Gu Shengyin's expression turned cold. "Qin Chuan, please don't be so mean to a child so much younger than you." Shen Yan was the most important person to her. No matter how good her personality was, she couldn't allow others to say anything bad about him. Shen Yan felt that all his dark thoughts had turned into bubbles and disappeared with his sister's words. He couldn't help but smile as he glanced at Qin Chuan smugly. "See, in my sister's heart, I'm her most important younger brother." Qin Chuan choked at Gu Shengyin's words. He turned around and saw Shen Yan's provocative gaze. He suddenly found it funny. Why was he being so calculative with a child? Hence, he said good-naturedly, yes, it's my fault. I shouldn't have argued with him." Gu Shengyin's expression improved. Tong Yuan, who was watching this scene from afar, felt that it was an eyesore. What did he mean by Qin Chuan was here for her? How could she not understand? Qin Chuan was clearly here for this girl. He had never been a good-tempered person in school, but he wasn't angry at all when he was humiliated in front of so many outstanding people. No one present was a fool. Everyone could tell that Qin Chuan had special feelings for Gu Shengyin. The other two girls looked at Tong Yuan worriedly. In their eyes, Qin Chuan and Tong Yuan had long been a couple. Every time they joked about this, Tong Yuan never denied it. But now, it seemed like that wasn't the case at all. Their gazes made Tong Yuan feel very sarcastic. These people must be laughing at him in their hearts, right? Usually they were so good to him, but at this time, they were secretly laughing at him. Tong Yuan immediately detested Qin Chuan and the unfamiliar girl. "I've made it so obvious. Can't Qin Chuan tell? And that girl, if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have lost so much face today." The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt. A girl next to her saw her head down and thought that she was sad. She walked over and held her hand worriedly. "Yuan, pa." Tong Yuan slapped her hand away, glared at her fiercely, and ran away without looking back. The girl, Qin Chuan, casually glanced in the direction she left in and didn't say anything. Of course, he understood Tong Yuanyuan's intentions. He also knew that this girl had been intentionally or unintentionally guiding others to tie the two of them together. Tong Yuanyuan's methods were indeed not bad in the eyes of ordinary high school students, but in the eyes of someone like him, who had been raised as the heir of his family since young, it was still not enough. He had to admit that he did it on purpose when he brought them here today. That kind of pitiful self-deception shouldn't exist anymore. Chapter 890. Gu Shengyin raised her head and looked in the direction that Tong Yuanyuan had left in. She asked Qin Chuan in surprise, "Is that your classmate? What's wrong with her?" No one felt that there was anything wrong with her words. This was because from the beginning to the end, she did not know Tong Yuanyuan at all, nor would she know about her relationship with Qin Chuan. It was normal to ask such a question when she saw such a situation. One of the two girls looked at Tong Yuanyuan worriedly and chased after her. The other stood where she was and looked at Qin Chuan and Gu Shengyin thoughtfully, but she did not follow. This made Gu Shengyin take another look at her. Today, Gu Shengyin came over to help bathe the cats and dogs. The stray animals here would be bathed by a professional every few days. Occasionally, when things got busy, there would not be enough manpower. At times like this, Gu Shengyin would often come over to help. "I'll help too." When the girl saw this, she came over excitedly. Gu Shengyin looked at her hesitantly for a moment. She immediately smiled and said, don't worry. I'm a professional. After all, I have a little princess at home." Afraid that Gu Shengyin would not believe her, she even washed a little cat in front of her. "Look, how is it?" Gu Shengyin smiled. The two of them sat together and bathed the little ones. Through chatting, Gu Shengyin found out that this girl's name was Su Miao Miao. She was in the same class as Qin Chuan and Tong Yuanyuan. This time, when Tong Yuanyuan suggested coming here, Su Miao Miao, who had always liked animals, immediately expressed that she wanted to come too. The other girl was on good terms with Tong Yuanyuan, so she specially accompanied her good friend here. Su Miao Miao suddenly leaned over and whispered to Gu Shengyin, "The girl who ran away earlier, we always thought that she and Qin Chuan were a couple in school." After she finished speaking, she felt that her statement might be wrong, so she quickly added, "Actually, we have never seen Qin Chuan being intimate with her, but every time we asked, she never denied it." This meant that Qin Chuan didn't have such intentions. It was very likely that Tong Yuanyuan had been directing and acting all along. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment. She understood that this girl was reminding her. She turned her head and smiled. "Thank you, but I still have to say that Qin Chuan and I are just ordinary friends." Su Miao Miao was stunned by his smile. No wonder Qin Chuan likes this girl. She thought. Strictly speaking, this girl called Ling Su was the same type of beauty as Tong Yuanyuan. In the past, it was fine just looking at Tong Yuanyuan, but now that he looked at Ling Su, he felt that this was a girl who truly exuded a gentle temperament from her bones. Tong Yuanyuan's appearance was mostly an act. With the help of these two people, the process of bathing the little ones was much faster. Su Miao Miao saw that Gu Shengyin was very close to those small animals. She seemed to be very familiar with this place. She asked, "Do you come here often?" Gu Shengyin nodded. "I don't have much to do usually, so I come here to take a look." Su Miao Miao glanced at her age. She should be a student like her. Why is she so free? However, she didn't ask. The two of them weren't that familiar with each other yet. On the other side, Qin Chuan, who had just returned from getting a glass of water, was stopped. "What's the matter, Nian Nian?" He was surprised for a moment and raised his eyebrows. Chapter 891. Shen Yan was still carrying his school bag. He had come here to look for Gu Shengyin after school today. He held the strap of his school bag with one hand and looked at Qin Chuan coldly. "Are we close? Please call me by my name." Qin Chuan. A rebellious child was not easy to deal with. However, on account that he was Susu's younger brother, he tolerated it. Qin Chuan nodded and looked like he had surrendered. All right. Shen Yan, why are you looking for me?" Shen Yan continued to look at him coldly. There was no extra emotion in his beautiful peach blossom eyes. "Stay away from my sister." Qin Chuan suddenly laughed out loud. "Shen Yan, are you 14 or 14 years old? Why are you still so clingy to your sister? She will marry and have children in the future. You can't stop her from interacting with anyone." Shen Yan's face flushed red. He suddenly sneered and said, "I don't care what will happen to her in the future. But now, I can be sure that as long as I tell my sister that you bullied me and that I don't like you, you can forget about getting a good look from my sister." Qin Chuan's expression became strange. He suddenly said, "Your sister has always told me that you are the most obedient and cute brother in the world. Aren't you afraid that your sister will be sad?" Shen Yan was unmoved. "She won't know. His sister trusted him so much. She wouldn't believe that he would do such a thing." A strange smile suddenly appeared on Qin Chuan's face. "Then look who's behind you." Shen Yan was shocked. He turned around and saw Gu Shengyin standing quietly behind him. There was no expression on her calm face. He didn't know how long she had been standing there. "Sister." Shen Yan suddenly panicked. He didn't know what his sister would think when she saw him like this. Would she hate him? He felt that he wasn't as pure and cute as she imagined. Would she hate him? After all, she had always liked beautiful and kind things. Shen Yan's fingernails, which were hidden in his sleeves, dug into his palms. The sharp nails pierced through his flesh, bringing him heart-wrenching pain. However, he didn't care at all. This was far from comparable to the anxiety and hesitation in his heart. He didn't dare to raise his head. He was afraid to see the disgust and disappointment on his sister's face. The flow of time seemed to have become extraordinarily long. For Shen Yan, when he was 13 years old, when he heard the news of his father's death and felt the pity and sighs of everyone around him, he didn't feel as breathless as he did now. Until a pair of hands gently grabbed his hands and opened his palms with unquestionable strength. "Child, why are you so cruel to yourself? Does it hurt?" A familiar gentle voice filled with heartache rang in her ears. Shen Yan raised his head and stared at the girl who was about the same height as him. There wasn't the slightest bit of disgust on her beautiful face. Her light brown eyes were filled with heartache. Seeing him raise his head, Gu Shengyin was both angry and distressed. "It's just a small matter. Do you have to?" Her voice stopped abruptly when she saw Shen Yan's appearance. The young man in front of him stared at him without blinking. His eyes were red, as if he was about to cry in the next second. What was going on? Gu Shengyin was speechless. Immediately, she was hugged by a strong force. Chapter 892. What if the child is still so coquettish when he grows up? Gu Shengyin thought to herself, feeling both sweet and vexed. She patted his back gently without any hesitation. "Xiao Nian, what's wrong?" "Don't be sad." Shen Yan hugged the slender body in his arms tightly. He wasn't sad at all. On the contrary, he was very happy. After a long while, he raised his head and saw Qin Chuan standing behind them. Qin Chuan had been frowning ever since he saw the interaction between the two siblings. Although he had always known that Su had a good relationship with her brother, it seemed like she doted on this child too much. Also, Qin Chuan tried his best to eliminate the strange feeling in his heart. The way they interacted didn't look like ordinary siblings. The moment Shen Yan saw him, a strong sense of vigilance rose in his eyes. He hadn't forgotten how this man had tricked him just now. Seeing his gaze, Qin Chuan spread his hands innocently and turned to face Gu Shengyin. "I think your brother needs to be taught a good lesson. He's so young, but he's already learned," Gu Shengyin interrupted him. "Qin Chuan, you don't have to worry about my brother's education." Qin Chuan had clearly seen her when she came here. However, he didn't remind Xiao Nian. He even intentionally or unintentionally led him to say something that would obviously displease her. It was really difficult for her to have a good impression of such a man. In other words, to Gu Shengyin, anyone who had the slightest bad intentions towards Shen Yan would be rejected by her. Shen Yan was her reverse scale. If there was anything wrong with Shen Yan, she could slowly discipline him. However, she couldn't tolerate others saying anything bad about him. Of course, she couldn't let others bully her own child. Qin Chuan didn't expect Gu Shengyin to treat him like this. In his impression, this girl was always gentle and soft when it came to any mistakes. She always had a warm smile on her face, as if nothing could cause her emotions to fluctuate. However, he didn't expect her to express her dissatisfaction so obviously with just a small joke. He still wanted to say something, but Gu Xingyin had already turned her head away. Clearly, she did not want to say anything more to him. Qin Chuan paused for a moment before finally leaving. Shen Yan looked at Gu Xingyin uneasily. Sister. He felt that his sister was a little different today. Gu Xingyin took his wrist. Come with me. After saying that, she took the lead and entered a room. Gu Xingyin often came to this place. She was also one of the founders of this foundation. This room was where she usually rested. She found the first aid kit, disinfected Shen Yan's wound expressionlessly, and put a band-aid on it. Shen Yan didn't need to probe to know that his sister was angry this time. Sister, I was wrong. He admitted his mistake without hesitation. His attitude was quite good. Gu Xingyin judged in her heart and then asked, Then tell me, where did you go wrong? Shen Yan paused. I shouldn't have lied. I shouldn't have threatened Qin Chuan. But that was not what Gu Xingyin wanted to hear. What else? Shen Yan was a little stunned. He felt that this was probably what he had done to anger his sister. Seeing Shen Yan like this, Gu Xingyin knew that he didn't get the point at all. Chapter 893. She was both angry and amused. Then let me tell you what I'm angry about. Gu Xingyin slowly said, Firstly, your defenses are too weak. What if Qin Chuan didn't just want to joke today and wanted to induce you to say something more serious? If I wasn't the one who walked over today, what kind of misunderstanding would others have of you when they heard what you said? Have you thought about it? Shen Yan wanted to speak. I won't. Gu Xingyin glared at him, and Shen Yan obediently shut up. Secondly, you shouldn't hurt yourself. Speaking of this, Gu Xingyin's heart ached. How big of a deal is this? Tell me, don't you feel pain when your nails are digging into your flesh? If you really do something bad and I find out, will you have to harm yourself to apologize? Shen Yan stared blankly at the chattering Gu Xingyin. This was a sister he had never seen before. In his impression, his sister always had a gentle smile on her face. She was gentle and polite to everyone and everything. She never had any unnecessary emotions. She was like a perfect character who lived in a painting. Although he knew that his sister was like this mostly because her body couldn't withstand too much emotional fluctuation. But today, she made an exception for him. Looking at this person's flushed face, as if a vivid character had walked out of a painting. Shen Yan felt as if a small seed had slowly sprouted in his heart. This seed was still very small, but it was very tenacious and persistent. One day, it would grow into a towering tree, and nothing would be able to stop it. Gu Xingyin felt herself being hugged gently. It was unlike the strong hug from before. This hug was very light, as if he was afraid that he would hurt her if he used too much force. Gu Xingyin sensed something called cherish from it. The anger in her heart suddenly disappeared without a trace in this hug. But she still had to teach him a lesson. She forced herself to say, Xiao Nian, don't act coquettishly. Let me tell you it's useless. You have to be punished for your mistake. Shen Yan hugged her waist and rubbed against her shoulder. He couldn't help but laugh. All right, little Nian will definitely obediently accept her punishment. Gu Xingyin sighed and pulled her away. Also, just because I didn't mention it in front of outsiders doesn't mean that I don't mind. Gu Xingyin looked at him seriously. Where did you learn to be so narrow-minded, huh? Are you planning to tell on me? Shen Yan's eyes flashed. In the end, he chose to tell the truth. He said honestly, I just don't like that Qin Chuan. I hate the way he looks at you. Big sister belongs to me alone. It's enough that you treat me well. You don't need anyone else. After he finished speaking, he looked at Gu Xingyin nervously. The 14-year-old Shen Yan was no longer at the age where he didn't know anything. He clearly knew how selfish and overbearing his words were. But even though he knew he shouldn't be like this, he couldn't help it. He didn't even want to hide his possessiveness from Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin was stunned. Unlike Shen Yan's worries, Gu Xingyin didn't feel that there was anything wrong with him being so possessive of her. She smiled helplessly and reached out to rub Shenyan's hair. What are you thinking about? There's no one else. Little Nyen is the most important person to me. 8 chapters. In the next 2 weeks, Kawenji would be especially busy. There would be all kinds of messy things, and the update time might not be stable. However, I will try my best to write 8,000 words a day. If I really can't write, I will take leave in advance and make up for it later. Good night, everyone. Mwah. Chapter 894. These words were so indulgent. Shen Yan stared at Gu Shengyin in a daze. It took him a while to recover. He lowered his head slightly to hide his reddened eyes. If you spoil me like this, I might become a bad child. Gu Shengyin pretended not to see that the child was so touched that he was about to cry. She gently held his hand. Little Nyen, who else can I spoil if not you? Let's go. It's getting late. Let's go home. When the two of them walked out of the courtyard, Qin Chuan was still there. When he saw the siblings walking out with smiles on their faces, he knew that this matter was over. He walked forward and said to Gu Shengyin, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Gu Shengyin smiled politely at him. Qin Chuan, it's okay. Her expression was gentle, but Qin Chuan's heart sank. This kind of attitude was clearly treating him as an ordinary stranger. Because she didn't care, she didn't blame him. He forced a smile. I'm really sorry about little Nyen. At this moment, Shen Yan tugged at Gu Shengyin's hand. Sister, I'm hungry. I miss the braised meatballs that Mama Chang made. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but laugh. Little glutton, I'll get Mama Chang to make it for you when we get back. She looked at Qin Chuan. Little Nyen and I will accept your apology. If there's nothing else, we'll go back first. Little Nyen still has homework to do at home. She politely bade farewell to Qin Chuan and then said goodbye to Su Miao Miao, who had been standing on the other side pretending to be a sapling. Only then did she leave. Su Miao Miao sighed inwardly. According to her observation, Qin Chuan and Ling Su were like a pair of lovers. When she saw Qin Chuan turn around, she hurriedly pretended to play happily with the little cat under her hand. Qin Chuan composed himself and raised his eyebrows when he saw the girl who was engrossed in playing with the cat. Su Miao Miao, I plan to go back. Are you going back by yourself later, or should I send you back now? Su Miao Miao quickly raised her head and revealed a bright smile. Then I'll have to trouble you. What a joke. This was the suburbs. Even if he wanted to take a taxi, he would have to wait for half a day. Of course, it was better to have a free driver. Su Miao Miao reluctantly said goodbye to her friends and got into Qin Chuan's car. Qin Chuan looked at the girl through the rearview mirror. She was quite at ease. She didn't feel uncomfortable being alone with him. This feeling made Qin Chuan feel strange. Qin Chuan's handsome looks and impressive family background made him understand his own charm. He knew how attractive he was in the eyes of teenage girls. He had always been proud of his charm. This girl called Su Miao Miao had always kept a low profile in class. If she hadn't come along to see the animals, Qin Chuan wouldn't have had much of an impression of her. The brain circuits of adolescent boys were probably a little abnormal. If Su Miao Miao had felt nervous, shy, and uneasy sitting alone in the car with him, Qin Chuan might not have felt anything. But she was indifferent. Especially when Qin Chuan had just been rejected by Gu Shengyin. He was already feeling unconfident in his charm. Now, he met another girl who didn't have any feelings for him. Qin Chuan couldn't help but take the initiative to greet Su Miao Miao. Chapter 895. Su Miao Miao was happily scrolling through her phone. When she heard this, she glanced at Qin Chuan in surprise. As a nobody in class, Su Miao Miao had always been good at entertaining herself. However, this did not mean that she did not know how to communicate with others. The two of them were surprisingly compatible. Qin Chuan felt that this girl was very interesting. He had chatted with other people in the past. Most girls paid attention to those things, such as celebrities, big brands, or anime. However, Su Miao Miao was different. The two of them didn't know how the topic had changed. By the time Qin Chuan reacted, the two of them had been talking about history in the car for half an hour. Qin Chuan. The car had arrived at the address Su Miao Miao had given him. The girl didn't notice that something was wrong at all. She smiled and waved goodbye to Qin Chuan. Goodbye, student Qin. Thank you for today. Also, I enjoyed chatting with you. Qin Chuan watched as the girl got out of the car in a good mood. Soon, she was drowned in the bustling crowd. He watched for a while and couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and drove home. Gu Shengyin and Xin Yan also returned home. Sure enough, at the dining table that night, Xin Yan saw the familiar braised meatballs. Gu Shengyin even personally picked up 2 for him. Since you like it, eat more. A teenage boy was still growing. Shen Yan obediently picked up the meatballs and finished them. Actually, he didn't particularly like this kind of greasy food. Ever since he learned about Gu Shengyin's taste, he gradually began to lean towards lighter food. What he said during the day was just an excuse to leave. After dinner, Shen Yan took the initiative to pull his sister downstairs for a walk in the garden. Ever since he learned about Gu Shengyin's physical condition, Shen Yan was much more concerned about this than his sister. They had dinner at 6:30 and walked for an hour. At 7:30, Gu Shengyin came to Shen Yan's room. Shen Yan obediently began to accept his punishment. According to Gu Shengyin, even if Shen Yan's attitude was very good and she was no longer angry, he still had to be punished for what had happened today. Of course, Shen Yan's punishment wasn't corporal punishment, but it wasn't easy either, 50 push-ups. Gu Shengyin felt that this kind of punishment could not only exercise his body, but also make him suffer a little. It couldn't be better. Shen Yan didn't have any objections to her sister's words. Without another word, she started on the spot. He knew that if he was soft-hearted towards the person in front of him, he would definitely get candy after giving her a slap. Sure enough, after 50 push-ups, Shen Yan was basically exhausted. After all, he was only a teenager. This kind of thing was quite exhausting. A clean towel was handed over. Gu Shengyin snorted. Do you know how tired you are? Let's see if you dare to do it again. Shen Yan replied quickly, I know I was wrong. I'll be more careful next time. The two of them chatted for a while more before Shen Yan looked at the time. Sister, you should prepare to wash up and rest. Otherwise, his rest time would be delayed again. Gu Shengyin looked at Shen Yan's serious appearance and laughed. I got it, little housekeeper. When she stood up, Shen Yanxiu suddenly stood up as well. Is there anything else? Shen Yan pursed his lips and said, Sister, can I hug you? Chapter 896. What was wrong with that? Gu Shengyin opened her arms. Shen Yan gently walked forward and gave her a hug. The aura in this embrace was so nostalgic and reluctant that he didn't want to let go. Shen Yan took a deep breath. The tip of his nose was filled with the scent that he loved the most. He raised his head slightly and saw the fair skin right in front of him. Her porcelain-white skin was extremely smooth. Even at such a close distance, he couldn't see a single flaw. Shen Yan didn't even need to think to know how wonderful it would feel to touch it. As if he was possessed, he suddenly leaned forward and gently kissed her on the side of her face. He only realized what he had done after kissing her. As if he had been electrocuted, a numb feeling came from where the two of them touched. Shen Yan froze. Until Gu Shengyin's puzzled voice came. Xiao Yan, what's wrong? Shen Yan looked up with a red face and saw Gu Shengyin's gentle face. She didn't seem to realize what that kiss meant. This realization made Shen Yan heave a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a little disappointed. He tried his best to put on a relaxed smile and said, A good night kiss for my sister. Gu Shengyin smiled. Our Xiao Yan is still a child. You're still learning how to kiss someone good night. Under Shen Yan's incredulous gaze, she leaned forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. Good night. The door was gently closed, but Shen Yan stayed where he was for a long time. His face was a little red. It wasn't because he was shy, but because he was excited. Just now, his sister kissed him. He gently raised his hand and slowly touched the place where his sister's lips had touched. There seemed to be some warmth left behind. His other hand slowly touched his heart. It was beating crazily because of someone. The ridiculous sapling in Shen Yan's heart had begun to slowly grow. That was the desire in his heart. Sister, it's you who gave me hope time and time again, making me feel I feel that I'm the most important person to you. I am the most unique and unique. He smiled and slowly extended his hand into the void. Suddenly, he clenched his fist as if he had caught something. Then, his hand tightened and Xinyan's expression became crazy and infatuated. You're mine now. Gu Xingyin didn't know what kind of changes had happened to Nian, who was well-behaved, soft, and adorable in her home in such a short time. She was discussing a serious problem with the system. That's right, it was the kiss just now. System, I didn't lead a minor astray just now, did I? She asked with uncertainty. After all, she was sure that no matter what happened, that man would definitely fall in love with her. However, 14 years old was a little too young. She felt that she was leading a minor astray. The system didn't dare to tell her about the scene it had accidentally seen just now. It thought to itself, your cute little Nian's insides are already dark. It replied calmly, Host, what did you do? It was just a pure goodnight kiss. Gu Shengyin thought about it and agreed. Based on the scene just now, unless Xiao Nian had some romantic thoughts, it was clearly just a simple goodnight kiss between the two of them. Chapter 897. The next morning, nothing seemed to have happened between the two of them. They had breakfast together happily. Student Xin. Before Xin Yan could reach the classroom door, he was stopped by someone. It was a petite and cute girl. She seemed especially nervous. She lowered her head slightly and didn't dare to look at Xin Yan. Her ponytail trembled. Xin Yan looked at the pink envelope in her hand and understood what was going on. He looked at the girl with some criticism. Her hair isn't as long as sister's, her skin isn't as good as sister's, her voice isn't as gentle as sister's, and her temperament isn't as good as sister's. In short, in this world, sister is the best and most beautiful girl. The girl finally mustered the courage to look up. The moment she saw Xin Yan, her face turned even redder. Looking at him from such a close distance, Xin Yan seemed even more handsome. She stuttered, Student Xin Yan, I like. Xin Yan's clear and pleasant voice slowly entered the girl's ears. He cruelly interrupted her confession before she could finish. I already have someone I like. The girl's face turned pale when she heard this. The envelope in her hand was squeezed out of shape. She lowered her head sadly. When she looked up again, Xin Yan had already left. A boy in Xin Yan's class was secretly looking over. He giggled and muttered, How many girls has Xin Yan rejected? He actually doesn't like such a beautiful junior. I wonder what kind of girls he likes? But when Xin Yan came in, they shut up. This Xin Yan always gave off an inexplicable aura. When he glanced over, the boys felt that his gaze was even scarier than the form teachers. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. 2 years. Gu Xingyin had officially become an adult last year, and GC had acted quickly. Not long after she turned 18, he had transferred all his assets to her name. He had even hired a professional financial advisor for her, set up a trust fund, and a series of other things. With Gu Xingyin's body, she didn't have enough energy to manage these things. Sister, good morning. The moment Gu Xingyin stepped out of the door, she received a refreshing morning hug. In the past 2 years, Xin Yan seemed to have taken some kind of miracle medicine. Gu Xingyin could barely stand shoulder to shoulder with him before, but now she could only reach his shoulder. At this speed, Gu Xingyin estimated that it would not be a problem for him to reach 9 meters. Shen Yan restrained his desire to not let go. He forced himself to let go of the person in his arms and took a step back. Today was the first day of the first year of high school. The class asked every student to invite their parents. Gu Xingyin decided to go to their school to have a look. Xin Yan was a little worried. Sister, are you okay? He knew that when his sister was young, the family doctor would rush over every 2 to 3 days because of her poor health. Therefore, she had never gone to school and had always hired a private tutor. She looked much better now, but there were many people in the school and it was noisy. With her sister's health, she could catch a cold with a sneeze. He was really worried. Gu Xingyin shook her head and said leisurely, "Don't think of me as so weak." As expected, the moment Gu Xingyin arrived in class, he was like a clear stream among the middle-aged parents who had put on weight. Every boy in puberty had a long-haired goddess in white clothes living in their hearts. Gu Xingyin's appearance perfectly satisfied their dreams of a goddess. Chapter 898. Fuck, I finally know why Xinyan has such high standards. It turns out that you have such a goddess at home. No wonder you don't like those girls. Xinyan's desk mate whispered to him enviously. Teenagers were the most fearless. Many boys even ignored the presence of the form teacher and surrounded Gu Xingyin. Hello, sister. I'm XXX, Xinyan's classmate. Sister, you're so beautiful. Sister, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have any requirements for a boyfriend? Xinyan's face darkened as he listened. These guys, his sister was his only sister. What right did they have to call her sister? Just as he was about to lose it, the form teacher couldn't stand it anymore and coughed heavily. The form teacher's authority was still very strong. The boys returned to their seats with smiles. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief. These enthusiastic children didn't have any bad intentions towards her. It was simply too overwhelming. Xinyan hurried forward and led Gu Xingyin to sit beside him. There was no expression on his face, but Gu Xingyin, who was familiar with him, knew that he was angry. What's wrong? She turned to ask him. Xinyan said sullenly, You're my sister. These words turned in Gu Xingyin's heart before she reacted. It turned out that he was jealous. She laughed in her heart. He was indeed a little boy who hadn't grown up. He was still unhappy about this. She gently held Xinyan's hand. Your classmates are all joking. To be honest, when Xinyan's classmates greeted her one after another, she was actually very happy. Because of Xinyan's past experience, she was always afraid that it would affect his personality and cause him to be unsociable in the new school. But now it seemed that Xinyan had adapted well in the new school. Xinyan lowered his head and didn't say anything. Of course, he knew that those people were just joking. They should be glad that they were just joking. Otherwise, but even if it was just a joke, he still felt very uncomfortable when he heard those words. He regretted not stopping his sister from coming to school. He should have known that his sister was such a beautiful person. No one who met her would not like her. He wanted to hide such a beautiful sister and not let anyone have the slightest chance to touch her. He was the only one who knew, saw, and felt such a wonderful sister. That would be enough. When he heard Gu Xingyin softly calling his name, his heart skipped a beat. He put away all the dark thoughts in his eyes, and when he raised his head again, he had already returned to his usual obedient and quiet self. What's wrong with you? Why are you so distracted today? Gu Xingyin asked curiously. Xinyan smiled embarrassedly. Sister, this is your first time coming to our school. I was wondering where I should bring you to later. So it was this. Gu Xingyin didn't care and said, just walk around. There are so many people today. I don't think I can take a good look. Xinyanji agreed wholeheartedly. If it were up to him, the two of them could have gone home earlier and enjoyed some time alone together. However, this was just a thought. It was rare for his sister to come to school. Naturally, she wanted to see where he went to school. After the parent-teacher meeting, Gu Xingyin and Xinyan slowly walked around the school. Chapter 899. From time to time, students would turn around to look at the two of them. After all, both of them were far more good-looking than average. Furthermore, Xinyan was known as the school hunk in school. The school hunk walking together with a beautiful girl was not a small piece of news. As Gu Xingyin walked, she sized up her surroundings. Although it was her first time here, she had chosen this place after a long time. The tuition fees of a private elite school were frighteningly expensive. However, regardless of whether it was the environment or the quality of the teachers, it was worthy of the price. Senior, what's wrong? Tong Yuanyuan stood there until someone called her. She came back to her senses. She smiled and pretended to be puzzled. I just saw two people walking past here. Poor they. The boy who was asked was obviously a little excited. He said, Senior, you're in the 3rd year of high school, so you don't know. That boy is a freshman this year. His name is Xinyan. The girl beside him is said to be his sister. She's here to attend the parent-teacher conference today. He told Tong Yuanyuan what she wanted to know in a few words. Tong Yuanyuan smiled politely at him. Okay, I got it. Thank you. The boy left with a dreamy look on his face. Just now, the famous gentle senior in the 3rd year of high school talked to me and even thanked me. He felt that he could brag about it when he returned to the dormitory. Tong Yuanyuan stood alone at the corner of the flower bed, coldly looking in the direction the two of them had left. How could she forget this name? At that time, it was because of that accident that the perfect situation that she had deliberately created for so long was destroyed without a trace left. Moreover, on the 2nd day she returned to school, everyone knew that she had nothing to do with Qin Chuan. Even if they did, it was just her one-sided love. Tong Yuanyuan was popular in school, but there were also many people who disliked her. At that time, she was mocked by several people in front of her. In the end, she relied on the image she had been building to successfully smooth things over. However, the embarrassment and humiliation of being forced into a corner were deeply imprinted in her heart. The person Qin Chuan truly liked was Ling Su. She couldn't forget it. Although she had never heard anyone mention that Qin Chuan had a girlfriend, she had kept this matter to herself. But today, when she suddenly saw Gu Shengyin, those things that she had deliberately forgotten surfaced one after another. She stood by the flower bed for a long time until the bell rang. Only then did she hurry back to the classroom. In fact, when Tong Yuanyuan appeared, Gu Shengyin had already noticed her presence. However, she ignored her. The Animal Home Foundation had already developed to a certain scale, and its influence had also reached a certain height. It had even appeared several times in the social news. It was impossible for Tong Yuanyuan to do anything to the top. And in this life, Gu Shengyin would not be like in the original plot, where she would not have her guard up against people at all. It would be fine if Tong Yuanyuan didn't come. Gu Shengyin sneered in her heart. If I don't make you regret it, how can I say that I'm here to complete a mission? After class, Tong Yuanyuan secretly dialed a number. This was a mysterious person that she had gotten in touch with by chance. Hello, please help me investigate someone. Chapter 900. After hanging up the phone, Tong Yuanyuan slowly smiled. She didn't know why this mysterious person was looking for her. At first, she had some doubts, but later, after learning a lot about her uncle and aunt's secrets and making her life better, Tong Yuanyuan treated him as a secret weapon. Anyway, there was only a simple relationship between the two of them. She would pay, and he would provide information. It was that simple. The mysterious person had always been very efficient. The next morning, she woke up. Tong Yuanyuan found that there was a lot of information in her mailbox. It was all about Ling Su. Tong Yuanyuan only read one page, and her expression froze. She quickly flipped to the back until all the content was over. It turned out that this girl had the same background as her. They were both unlucky, but she was much luckier than her. She was taken in by a family of locust-like relatives. Not to mention the comfort of family, it was already quite good that she didn't suffer from cold treatment. But what about Ling Su? Her father had made plans for her early on and entrusted her to someone he could truly trust. It was the same experience. She lived under someone else's roof, but Ling Su grew up like a princess and never had to worry about anything. They were both humans, but why was there such a big difference in their lives? He was still struggling and haggling over those assets, but what about her? As soon as she turned 18, she couldn't wait to transfer all the wealth under her name to her. She even planned for her future. Ling Su only needed to be a carefree young lady. The wealth left by the Ling family was enough for her to spend in 10 lifetimes. The more she thought about it, the more indignant Tong Yuanyuan felt. As for Ling Su's younger brother, Shen Yan, he was simply mentioned. This information only said that he was a child adopted by Ling Su. He didn't even have a household register with the Ling family, so he naturally had no inheritance rights in the future. He looked like an unfavored adopted son. However, Tong Yuanyuan recalled the 2 times they met, and how they interacted. She narrowed her eyes. It didn't look like they had a bad relationship. She called the mysterious man again and asked him to send her a detailed copy of Shen Yan's information. She also gave him a new price. Tong Yuanyuan finished reading at a glance, and a plan formed in her mind. It seemed that although these two siblings were not related by blood, after all, they had depended on each other for so many years. Their relationship was definitely not something that ordinary people could compare to. Perhaps Xin Yan's side was a good breakthrough point. Xin Yan had no idea that he had been targeted. He was standing at the door of the classroom, looking at one of his classmates with an expressionless face. Hey, Xin Yan, I'm telling the truth. It's true. I fell in love with your sister at first sight. I'm definitely sincere. The boy looked at him sincerely. I'm already 17 years old, and I've never been so sad about a girl before. The first time I saw her, my heart felt like it was struck by an electric current. It was numb. The boy was still reminiscing. Shen Yan was still expressionless as he walked around him, intending to leave. His hands were tightly clasped together in his sleeves. If he didn't leave, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't do such a thing. Who was it that dared to covet his sister? Elder sister, obviously can only belong to me. Chapter 901. Unfortunately, the boy obviously didn't know how to read the situation. Seeing that Shen Yan was about to leave, he hurriedly stepped forward and stopped him. Shen Yan, you can't be so petty, right? We're classmates after all. I don't need you to put in a good word for me in front of your sister. Can you help me give this to her? His hand passed something over. It was a light blue envelope. Shen Yan had received countless such things before. He didn't need to look to know what was written inside. He stared at the boy coldly. No. The boy's temper flared up. How dare you, Shen Yan? Fine, I'll pretend that I don't have a classmate like you. I'll find it myself. When I find your house, I'll hand it to her personally. Shen Yan's eyes turned red because of the boy's words. He gritted his teeth and said, No. The boy also snorted. You're too nosy. I'm just pursuing your sister. I'm not pursuing you. What can you do about it? Shen Yan said, My sister already has someone she likes. You don't have a chance. She had said that she liked him. The boy was stunned. What? Didn't you say she didn't have a boyfriend? Shen Yan said coldly, Did my sister admit it herself? The boy looked at Shen Yan suspiciously. You're not lying to me on purpose, are you? Shen Yan glanced at him. She has the most important person in her heart and the person she likes the most. My sister told me this herself. That's right. She had said that Xiao Yan was the person she liked the most and the most important. The boy was speechless. Teenage boys were impulsive when it came to relationships. He had never thought about what he would do if his goddess had a boyfriend. Then, the boy hesitated for a moment before insisting, Then please help me give this to your sister. It's her business whether she accepts me or not. I have to let her know my heart. Shen Yan couldn't take it anymore. Just as he was about to swing his fist at the boy's face, he suddenly changed his mind. Okay, he said softly. The boy was immediately overjoyed. He carefully handed the envelope to Shen Yan like it was a treasure. Please, brother, you must hand it to your sister. I'll treat you to a meal tomorrow. Shen Yan didn't answer. He stuffed the envelope into his bag, turned around, and left. The boy didn't pay much attention to it. Shen Yan was known for being quiet and didn't like to talk much. Shen Yan carried his backpack and took the car home. When he went upstairs, he deliberately took out the blue letter from his bag. Without even looking at it, he slowly tore it into pieces and threw it into the trash can. How could he possibly give such a thing to his sister and let it be an eyesore to her? Sis. Gu Xingyin turned around and saw the warm smile on Shen Yan's face. You're back early today. Shen Yan nodded and sat beside Gu Xingyin. Nothing much today. Sister, he suddenly called out. Gu Xingyin nodded and waited for him to continue. Unexpectedly, Shen Yan didn't say anything after waiting for a long time. She turned around and saw Shen Yan looking at her with tears in his eyes. Gu Xingyin was shocked. What's wrong with Xiao Yan? Why did he suddenly have such an expression? Shen Yan seemed to be trying his best to control his emotions. He asked, I'm not related to my sister at all. If she has someone she likes in the future, will I have to move out? Chapter 902. Gu Shengyin wondered, why did you suddenly think of this? Shen Yan snorted in his heart. It's because there are too many people coveting you. He lowered his head and did not speak. Gu Xingyin's heart tightened and said, Did someone gossip in front of you? Shen Yan still did not speak. Gu Xingyin sighed and said, Xiao Nian, don't you know how I've been treating you these past few years? She reached out and wanted to rub his head a few times like before, but found that he had grown too tall. She had to tiptoe to do this. She turned her hand and wanted to pat him on the shoulder, but the big boy in front of her had already lowered his head consciously. Gu Shengyin successfully rubbed Shen Yan's head and said gently, Don't worry. No matter what happens in the future, I and Xiao Nian will always be a family. This is your home. No one can make you move out. However, Shen Yan's focus was not on this. What he was thinking at this moment was that she did not deny that sentence. She did not say that she would not like anyone in the future. In the future, she would marry, have children, and have her own family. Just thinking about this kind of thing made Shen Yan want to kill someone. Seeing that the child was still keeping his head down and not saying anything, Gu Shengyin secretly wondered if he had not been honest enough just now. But she had clearly said it very clearly. Alas, adolescent children were not easy to deal with. You could never guess what was going on in their little heads. Gu Shengyin thought with some melancholy. Shen Yan suddenly turned around. I remember that I have something to do. I'll go back to my room first. He left in a hurry. Gu Shengyin, who was sitting on the sofa, was confused. So, what was going on? Shen Yan hurried back to his room and closed the door. He leaned against the door tightly. Upon closer inspection, his face was full of forbearance and even a trace of madness. Yes, madness. He did not dare to stay in front of Gu Shengyin any longer. He was afraid that if he continued to stay here, he wouldn't be able to hold himself back. He couldn't help but want to hold that delicate figure tightly in his arms. He wanted to kiss those lips that always spoke gentle words. He closed his eyes and tried his best to expel those thoughts from his mind. He stretched out his hands and made a hugging gesture. It was as if he could deceive himself and pretend that the person was in his arms. After a long while, Shen Yan got up expressionlessly, took off his bathrobe, and went into the bathroom. Turning on the cold water switch, he let the cold water pour down from his head, as if this could extinguish the burning fire in his heart. There wasn't a moment when he didn't want to tell his sister about his feelings. However, he had to carefully hide his thoughts at all times. He couldn't let anyone know, especially her. Because it was very likely that once such thoughts were exposed, what awaited him would be the cruelest judgment. As long as she thought about that pair of eyes that always looked at her with tolerance and gentleness, she might one day feel disgusted and unhappy. Shen Yan felt that it was better to leave it as it was. At least for now, he was still the most important person to her. He could be so close to her every day, be close to her, look at her, and feel her warmth. This was good, he said to himself. Although such torturous days were almost driving him crazy. Chapter 903. The next day after school, Shen Yan was stopped by an unfamiliar girl at the school gate. He frowned at her. Tong Yuanyuan took a closer look at the boy. He was indeed the school hunk. With his handsome appearance and slightly cold temperament, he was indeed the type that attracted girls. Tong Yuanyuan glanced at Shen Yan's eyes. Such a person definitely couldn't be a fool, nor was he someone who was willing to be under others for a long time. Since this was the case, she was more confident in her next plan. Shen Yan was about to walk around her and leave. Wait, Shen Yan. I have something to talk to you about. Tong Yuanyuan hurriedly stopped him. He was as unapproachable as the rumors said. Shen Yan didn't stop. I'm not interested in what you have to say. Tong Yuanyuan smiled confidently behind him. It's about your sister, Ling Su. Aren't you interested? Shen Yan's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. Shen Yan turned around and stared at Tong Yuanyuan with a sharp gaze. Tong Yuanyuan actually felt a trace of pressure under such a gaze. How was that possible? He was just a 16-year-old high school student. She comforted herself that she was overthinking. What is it? Shen Yan asked slowly. Tong Yuanyuan looked around. It was the end of the school day, and there were already students secretly looking at the two of them. It's not convenient here. How about we find a place to talk? 15 minutes later. Speak. Shen Yan didn't even put down his school bag. He looked at the girl in front of him indifferently. Tong Yuanyuan's eyes flashed when she saw that he was about to leave at any time. It had been a long time since she met someone who didn't give her face. She slowly stirred the coffee in the cup with a spoon and said leisurely, Shen Yan, I know that you're just adopted by Ling Su, right? Shen Yan's gaze suddenly turned cold as he stared at Tong Yuanyuan. This was the thing he hated the most. This fact always told him that he had nothing to do with his sister. However, this was also one of the things he was most grateful for. After countless midnight dreams, he had to be grateful that he wasn't related to her by blood. However, this didn't mean that he was willing to let others know about this. When Tong Yuanyuan saw Shen Yan's expression, a smile appeared on her face. As expected, he cared so much about this matter. Seeing that Shen Yan had no intention of replying, she didn't mind. Instead, he continued, Shen Yan, look, Ling Su adopted you, but she didn't give you the Ling family's household registration. The Ling family has so much property, but not a single cent will belong to you. Look at how hypocritical that woman is. She adopted you and earned a good reputation, but in reality, all she did was provide a pair of chopsticks and a few coins that were insignificant to her. Shen Yan, are you really willing? Tong Yuanyuan took a sip from the cup in her hand and continued to bewitch him. You've lived in the Ling family for a few years. You should know better than me how rich the Ling family is, right? Did you really not think about such a huge sum of wealth? You're the one who has the best relationship with Ling Su now. If she's really good for you, she should give you more of her assets, right? But from the looks of it now, her kindness to you is only on the surface. Chapter 904. Think about it. Ling Su doesn't have any immediate family in this world. If anything were to happen to her, you would be the most qualified person in the world to inherit her assets. Shen Yan stared fixedly at Tong Yuanyuan. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. I'm very curious. What kind of deep hatred do you have with my sister? Why are you scheming against her? Also, I used to live a life where I didn't even have enough to eat and wear. My sister adopted me and provided for me to study so that I could live like a human. He said word by word, from the beginning to the end, I, Shen Yan, owed Ling Su. She never owed me anything. The Ling family's assets originally belonged to my sister alone. What right do I have to covet her things? Tong Yuanyuan's face darkened at his words. Could it be that she was mistaken? Was Shen Yan really an obedient and cute little white flower? She looked down and saw Shen Yan's tightly clenched fists. Upon closer inspection, his voice was so righteous, but his eyes weren't angry at all. He was just good at pretending. So he wanted to be a bitch and pretend to be a chastity. Tong Yuanyuan's heart calmed down. She let go of her hand that was stirring the coffee, looking as if she had seen through him. There's only the two of us here. Shen Yan, stop pretending. Everyone has desires. It's not shameful, she said patiently. Compared to the Ling family's hundreds of millions of assets, think about it. What are other things? I really want to work with you. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Shen Yan's eyes flashed and his expression slowly returned to normal. His expression was a little strange as he slowly stared at Tong Yuanyuan. I'm very curious. What kind of hatred do you have with my sister? Why are you trying so hard to take revenge on her? It was hard to imagine that someone like Ling Su would have enemies. Tong Yuanyuan smiled casually. Perhaps her life is too perfect. It's so perfect that people can't stand it and want to ruthlessly crush it. Such an unreasonable reason. Shen Yan clenched his other hand tightly under the table. He controlled his desire to kill this vicious woman and spoke to her slowly. He was silent for a long time. Tong Yuanyuan wasn't in a hurry. She knew that for most people, this kind of thing required a buffer time. However, she was confident that this boy would not reject her. She had always been confident that in front of the temptation of huge benefits, kinship and morals were all bullshit. Only the benefits that were truly within one's grasp were real. Sure enough, Shen Yan raised his head. His eyes were even a little red from excitement. He seemed to be trying his best to suppress his excitement. What do you want me to do? Tong Yuanyuan revealed a confident smile. No one knows Ling Su's body condition better than you, right? I heard that with her body condition, a small allergy or a mild cold could kill her. She didn't continue, but she looked at Shen Yan suggestively. Shen Yan heard his own cold voice. You know quite a lot. Have you thought about this carefully? Tong Yuanyuan replied quickly, know yourself and know your enemy. Only then can you win 100 battles. Chapter 905. Shen Yan used all his strength to leave the cafe normally. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself and would strangle that vicious woman to death. With such a conversation, he naturally returned home a little later. Gu Xingyin was a little worried when she saw him. Why are you back so late today? Shen Yan shook his head. I ran into something when I left school. By the way, sister, he suddenly asked, do you know Tong Yuanyuan? Tong Yuanyuan? Gu Xingyin was stunned. How did Xiaoyan know her? She shook her head. I don't know her. In this world, the only time she had met Tong Yuanyuan was in the animal home. Tong Yuanyuan had run away without even introducing herself. It was normal that she had no impression of her. A person her sister didn't even know wanted her life for such a strange reason. Gu Xingyin was a little wary. What's the matter with Tong Yuanyuan? Shen Yan smiled. Nothing. I just heard someone mention it today. They said that Tong Yuanyuan's temperament is quite similar to yours. Gu Xingyin nodded and didn't say anything. Obviously, she didn't take it to heart. Then I'll go back and do my homework first. Shen Yan seemed a little anxious and hurried back to his room. Gu Xingyin frowned. The system told her today that Tong Yuanyuan had found Shen Yan after school and the two of them had chatted for a long time. Why was Xiaoyan hiding it from her? Gu Xingyin was a little confused. She was very assured that Shen Yan would never hurt her. But why was he hiding it from her? Shen Yan returned to his room and took out his phone from his pocket. He pressed a button and a clear voice came from the phone. Think about it. Ling Su doesn't have any immediate family in this world. After listening to it carefully, he edited the recording and put it on a website. The school forum. Because there were many students who browsed the forum, and even some teachers would hold some part-time lectures on the forum. Almost everyone in this school had a forum account. Tong Yuanyuan was considered a well-known figure in the school. Many people knew her, and there were also many who could recognize her voice. The male voice that was talking to her had obviously been edited to a certain extent. There was no way to tell who it was. The conversation between the two involved a mission, so their names had been censored. In short, the only one who was completely exposed was Tong Yuanyuan. This caused an uproar. If it wasn't a prank, Tong Yuanyuan's words meant that she was encouraging him to commit a crime. This was completely different from her usual image to the outside world. Tong Yuanyuan habitually logged into the forum at night and found that she had received countless S. She clicked on the audio and her face turned green. What a good Shen Yan. Was he trying to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness? She sneered. This kind of thing, as long as she didn't admit it, or said that it was a prank, who could jump out to testify that she did it deliberately? She didn't believe that Shen Yan would take the initiative to jump out and say that the other party was him. Immediately, she sent out a long and eloquent article of a few thousand words. She expressed that even she herself was confused. She had no idea what this thing was and it should be a prank. The image that she had built up over the years was still very useful. Many people believed that their goddess wasn't such a person. Shen Yan looked coldly at Tong Yuanyuan, who easily turned the situation around, and sneered. He was waiting for her to retaliate. Chapter 906. The next day, Tong Yuanyuan went to school with a normal expression. Her classmate was a girl who had a good relationship with her. When she saw her, she was a little worried. Yuanyuan, that recording, not only her desk mate, but the other students in the class also pricked up their ears and paid attention to this side. Tong Yuanyuan cursed this group of nosy people in her heart, but on the surface, she smiled and replied in a low voice that everyone could hear. Don't worry. I, Tong Yuanyuan, have always been upright. Things that I haven't done will never become true. Her words were so loud and clear, full of righteousness. Her desk mate breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, I knew it. How could Yuan Yuan do such a vicious thing? Tong Yuan Yuan returned her a reserved smile. However, her peace did not last long. During the third period of math class, the class teacher appeared at the door of the classroom with a serious expression and interrupted the math teacher's lecture. Tong Yuan Yuan, come out first. Tong Yuan Yuan's heart skipped a beat, and she had a bad feeling. Could something have happened? Under the curious gaze of the whole class, Tong Yuan Yuan stood up calmly and walked to the door of the classroom. The class teacher glanced at her and did not say anything. She led her to the office. The premonition in Tong Yuan Yuan's heart grew stronger and stronger. She forced a smile and said to the class teacher, Teacher, I wonder what you're looking for me for? In the eyes of outsiders, she had always been a generous, gentle, and kind girl. The class teacher had always had a good impression of her. But at this time, the class teacher just shook her head. She suddenly stopped and asked, Yuan Yuan, tell me, is the recording that was spread on the forum real? What Tong Yuan Yuan did not want to hear the most now was about the recording. But since the class teacher asked, she had to answer. She put on an innocent look and seemed a little sad. Teacher, it's all fake. It's true. I definitely did not do such a thing. Someone must be framing me. The class teacher seemed to be relieved when she heard this answer. Just at the door of the office, the class teacher stopped and said to Tong Yuan Yuan kindly, I believe you, Yuan Yuan. You have always been a good child. However, Tong Yuan Yuan did not feel comforted. The class teacher opened the office door. Tong Yuan Yuan was shocked when she saw the people inside. Police. The two policemen were obviously waiting for her. Seeing Tong Yuan Yuan, one of them said, You must be Tong Yuan Yuan. We received a report saying that you were trying to murder someone. Premeditated murder? Such a crime was no small matter. At this moment, Tong Yuan Yuan calmed down. She heard her calm voice. I don't know what you're talking about. If it's that recording, I can only say that I don't know anything. The policeman wasn't surprised by her words. He only said, It is indeed that recording. It's just that our police station received the complete version, and the person who reported it was another person involved. What? Tong Yuan Yuan could no longer maintain her composure. Was Shen Yan an idiot? Reporting the case myself? Wasn't he afraid that Ling Su would be wary of him from now on? When the policeman saw her facial expression, he already had a rough guess. I'm really sorry. In order to cooperate with the case, we need you to come with us. Chapter 907. Tong Yuan Yuan's class teacher said worriedly, Tong Yuan Yuan is our classmate. The police officer smiled. Don't worry, we've already contacted her parents. He then asked Tong Yuan Yuan to call her parents in front of the class teacher. The class teacher was relieved when she heard Tong Yuan Yuan's aunt's voice. Tong Yuan Yuan was no longer as calm as before. She really didn't expect Shen Yan to dare. Everything was within Shen Yan's expectations. In front of ironclad evidence, Tong Yuan Yuan couldn't argue no matter how much she wanted to. Usually, when no harm was caused, Tong Yuan Yuan's treatment was mainly based on the attitude of the victim. The police were about to contact Gu Xingyin, but Shen Yan rejected their request. My sister's health is very poor. I can provide the hospital proof. This kind of thing is too traumatic for her. I don't want this to affect her negatively. Shen Yan said straightforwardly, I've already contacted someone yesterday. He's my sister's guardian and can make the decision on her behalf. When he called the police yesterday, he had already called GC. Shen Yan actually didn't like GC. He couldn't tell the reason. It was probably a subtle jealousy. Before he had the ability to protect anyone, this man had always taken on the role of protecting his sister. To his elder sister, he was no ordinary person. However, even though he didn't like him, Shen Yan knew very well that under such circumstances, as a minor, he couldn't help his sister much. Therefore he looked for GC. GC had bought the earliest flight after receiving the news. No matter what the situation was, he couldn't ignore such a matter. You want us to forgive you? GC was still wearing a tight-fitting black suit. Not a single strand of hair was out of place. This man, no matter when, no matter how hurried he was, would always show his strongest and most perfect side. Tong Yuanyuan felt a little breathless. This man's aura was too terrifying. But she gritted her teeth. If she didn't fight for it, it would really be over. When his uncle and Andy found out about this, they were probably hoping that his sentence would be more severe so that they would have enough time to embezzle all the assets that his parents had left for him. With tears in her eyes, she looked pitiful and regretful. I really know I was wrong. Actually, I'm not close to Lingsu. At that time, I was just blinded. I was just joking with Shenyan most of the time. GC sat quietly to the side. He didn't react at all to her words. Tong Yuanyuan could only continue, "Can you forgive me?" She bit her lips and suddenly took a step forward. With a hoarse voice, she said, "As long as you're willing to let me go, I am willing to do anything." The last sentence was incomparably ambiguous and seductive. GC finally showed some reaction. He raised his head and scanned Tong Yuanyuan from head to toe with his sharp eyes. "I've been sitting here for a total of 8 minutes and 23 seconds. During this time, you said you were wrong 3 times, but from beginning to end, I haven't heard a single word of apology from you to Su. Then, Miss Tong Yuanyuan, are you apologizing just for me?" Chapter 908. His tone was very steady and there was no hint of mockery in it. However, in Tong Yuanyuan's ears, it sounded inexplicably mocking. GC wasn't done speaking. "Miss Tong Yuanyuan, you're an adult. I believe you have enough self-control and thinking ability. You can be responsible for any decision you make under normal circumstances. This matter itself doesn't need any leeway to reverse the situation." GC stood up and paused as he was about to leave. "Alright, there's one more thing." He glanced at Tong Yuanyuan and said, "A girl's body is very precious. I hope you can cherish it." The door was gently closed. Tong Yuanyuan squatted on the ground weakly. A huge sense of shame spread from the bottom of her heart. At this moment, she didn't want to see anyone. However, someone quickly came in. Her aunt had thick makeup on her face. When she saw her, she started to scold her sarcastically. "Let me see, my Miss Tong is really gentle and kind. She can even kill someone without hesitation." She looked at Tong Yuanyuan as if she had seen something dirty. "Oh my God, if others know that we raised you, who knows how they'll point fingers at us behind our backs. Fortunately, our Jiyuan went overseas. Otherwise, she might have been implicated by you." Tong Yuanyuan's uncle couldn't seem to listen anymore. He tugged at his wife's hand. Her aunt shook him off impatiently and scolded even louder. "What's wrong? What did I say wrong? She's the one who's shameless and vicious. Guardian of a murderer, is this a good name? I feel ashamed for her. She'll be too embarrassed to go out next month. If you ask me, such a person living in this world." Her words became more and more unpleasant. Tong Yuanyuan listened to the shrew-like scolding and suddenly thought of the man who had just left. They were like people from 2 different worlds. She thought again. Why was there such a big difference between her life and Lingsu's? If at that time her guardian had been like that man, would she not have to live so tirelessly? Who didn't want to live a carefree life without any worries? GC walked out of the room and talked to the police for a while. Shen Yan sat outside and waited until he saw GC walk out. He hurriedly went up to him and asked, "Is everything settled?" GC glanced at him and nodded. "No problem." Shen Yan exhaled and asked uncertainly, "They won't disturb sister, right?" GC opened the car door and got in. After Shen Yan got in, he started the car. "It won't affect Susu," GC replied. The two of them fell into silence. Speaking of which, Shen Yan and GC were basically strangers. To GC, the only person he was responsible for was Ling Su. As for Shen Yan, he was brought home by Ling Su. Naturally, everything was arranged by her. "You're not bad," GC suddenly said. These words came out of nowhere, but Shen Yan understood the meaning behind them. He snorted awkwardly. "I don't need you to judge whether I'm good or not. The corners of GC's cold lips curled up in a faint arc. Su had a good eye. This boy was someone who knew how to be grateful and had a righteous heart. If that was the case, he would feel more at ease. Chapter 909. Gu Shengyin was surprised to see the person who came back with Shenyan. "Cousin, why are you back? Why didn't you call in advance?" She was still very happy. Although her relationship with GC wasn't particularly close, in Ling Su's heart, GC had always been a pillar of support. GC was Ling Su's teacher and father. She respected him more than she was close to him. Facing Gu Shengyin, GC's expression softened. "I had something to do here at the last minute. I happened to meet Shenyan on the way, so I came back with him." Gu Shengyin nodded and didn't ask any more questions. GC had come back at the last minute for this matter. He still had a lot of things to deal with, so he would only stay for one night. His room in the Ling family residence had always been tidied up, so he could move in directly. It was very convenient. That night, GC and Gu Shengyin chatted for a while. Actually, it was mostly Gu Shengyin talking. GC would occasionally ask a few questions, but the atmosphere between the two of them was very good. Shenyan sat at the side and ate fruit sourly, but he didn't know who to vent his jealousy on. Finally, it was time for Gu Shengyin to rest. GC had to wake up early tomorrow to catch a plane and was preparing to go upstairs to rest. The two of them ended their conversation. Shenyan sneaked into his sister's room. "What's wrong, Xiaoyan?" Shenyan was speechless. Actually, he was fine. It was just that when he saw the interaction between the two of them, he felt a little jealous. Actually, he knew in his heart that there was no special relationship between his sister and GC. If there was, it was just kinship. But he just couldn't bear it. Seeing his sister close to someone else, no matter what kind of creature the other party was, he would feel jealous. He wished that he was the only creature within 3 meters of his sister. He thought for a moment and finally found an excuse for himself. "I haven't said good night to sister yet," he said calmly and walked forward to give Gu Shengyin a hug before she went to bed. Gu Shengyin. Adolescent boys were indeed hard to understand. The next day, when Shenyan went out, he didn't see GC. He had indeed gone to the airport early. He finished his breakfast in a good mood. When he heard that Tong Yuanyuan didn't come to class, he was in a better mood. Tong Yuanyuan's sentence came quickly. She was imprisoned for 2 years. The school's explanation was that she had been suspended from school due to a sudden illness. However, based on the recording on the forum and Tong Yuanyuan's energetic appearance yesterday, anyone could tell that this was just an excuse. Shenyan and GC both hid this matter from Gu Shengyin. It would be best not to disturb her if he could not disturb her. This was the consensus between the two men. However, they did not know that Gu Shengyin already knew about this matter. "Are you afraid that I'm thinking too much?" Gu Shengyin looked at the information sent by the system and laughed. The two of them had actually managed to deal with the greatest threat to him in this world by joining forces. She hadn't even made a move. Gu Shengyin stretched lazily and opened the curtains. The soft sunlight accompanied by the cool morning breeze brushed past her cheeks. Outside the window, the newly bloomed roses trembled slightly with the morning dew. A little further away, she could see the scene of an old man taking his grandson for a walk outside. Her mood was as good as this scene. Chapter 910. Another 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. In the past 2 years, Gu Shengyin's health had improved. Shenyan kept a close eye on her and made her rest, take medicine, and exercise every day. Although she was still a little thin and pale compared to the average person, she no longer looked like she would collapse from a gust of wind. At this moment, she was sitting in a Western restaurant with Qin Chuan. "I want to ask you a favor." Qin Chuan was obviously a little embarrassed. "Miao Miao is on good terms with you. Can you help me ask what kind of gift she likes?" Gu Shengyin couldn't help but laugh. At that time, she didn't expect Qin Chuan and Su Miao Miao to be together. Su Miao Miao's personality was very good. After that, the two of them met several times at the animal house and added each other as friends. Later on, they developed into good friends. Qin Chuan also went to the animal house diligently, But his goal had changed. In the past, it was obvious who it was for. Later on, it became Su Miao Miao. When Shen and his classmates went out to play, someone tugged at him. Shen, look, is that your sister? The people in Shen's class had a deep impression of Gu Shengyin. After all, with her looks and aura, it was really difficult to forget after seeing her once. Shen looked over from afar. Wasn't that Gu Shengyin by the window? She was sitting opposite a man. From the expression on her face, she seemed to be very happy. And the man opposite her, Shen narrowed his eyes. He remembered him, Qin Chuan, the man who had harbored ill intentions towards his sister a long time ago. His friend was still sighing. Is that your sister and her boyfriend? He's quite handsome. Shen turned around and said to him, that's not my sister's boyfriend. He's just an ordinary friend. I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do, so I'll go home first. Without waiting for a reply, he strode away. That person looked at him in confusion, muttered a few words, and left. Shen didn't go very far. He found a more secluded place where he could see his sister, but the other party couldn't see him. Then he dialed a number. Gu Shengyin picked up her phone and saw that it was Shen. She picked it up. Little Nian, what's wrong? Shen tried her best to sound normal. Sister, school is over. Can you accompany me to buy something? Buying things at this time? Gu Shengyin glanced at the time and said, I'm afraid I can't do it today. I'm with a friend outside now. I'll accompany you tomorrow, okay? Shen tightened his grip on the phone and said slowly, Friend? What friend? Do I know him? Gu Shengyin didn't notice anything wrong with his tone and replied, just an ordinary friend. You don't know him. She was about to say that it was Qin Chuan, but when she thought about how Xiao Nian and Qin Chuan had been unhappy back then, she didn't want to tell him and affect his mood. Shen said calmly, all right then, I'll wait for you tomorrow. He hung up the phone but did not leave. He stood there quietly and watched the two of them interact in a good atmosphere until Gu Shengyin stood up first. Aya! Gu Shengyin felt dizzy and was about to fall to the side. Qin Chuan quickly supported her. Are you okay? Gu Shengyin shook her head and smiled embarrassedly. I might have sat for too long. My blood isn't flowing properly. In Shen's eyes, the two of them were hugging each other intimately. Chapter 9-11. His hand grabbed the railing beside him tightly. He didn't even realize that his fingernails were being squeezed so hard that they were congested. He watched the two of them leave with bloodshot eyes. Qin Chuan even opened the car door for his sister. The two of them got into the car and left. Actually, you don't have to be so polite. I can ask the driver to pick me up, Gu Shengyin said. Qin Chuan shook his head. If Miao Miao finds out that I left you behind and went home alone, she will definitely nag me for an hour. Not to mention Miao Miao, even he himself was worried about letting Gu Shengyin go home alone. When Gu Shengyin returned home, she was told that Shen had not returned home yet. She called Shen. At this moment, Shen was wandering aimlessly on the road. He didn't want to go home at all. He didn't know what he was trying to escape from. When he received Gu Shengyin's call, his eyes lit up. However, when he thought that she might have just gotten out of Qin Chuan's car, his mood darkened again. Xiao Nian, why aren't you home yet? The voice on the phone was still as gentle as ever. Shen thought that not long ago, she had also been so gentle with another man. He tried his best to make his voice sound normal. I'm out with a few classmates today. I'll be back a little late. Gu Shengyin didn't suspect anything. It was normal for boys to go out and play. She was worried that Shen was too homesick. She asked if he was going home for dinner. After getting a negative answer, Gu Shengyin was very considerate to let him have fun. Shen walked slowly on the street until he was blocked by a few people with dyed yellow hair. We've been a little tight on money recently. Little brother, do you think you can help us out a little? The leader of the hooligans sized up Shen. His long time on the streets had created a pair of good eyesight. One look at the boy's clothes and he knew that he would be a fat sheep. Help! Shen's lips curled into a strange smile. What a coincidence! I've been in a bad mood recently. Let me relax a little. I'll help you out a little, okay? He carefully placed his school bag on the ground. Motherfucker, this brat is crazy. Blondie spat out the cigarette but in his mouth onto the ground. Brothers, let's teach this rude little brother some manners. 15 minutes later. Shen Yan bent down and picked up the bag on the ground. He even carefully patted the dust off it. His sister had bought it for him. It would be a pity if it got dirty. In front of him, little Yellow Feather was lying messily on the ground. He slowly walked up to Blondie and stepped on his wrist. The blonde's face instantly turned pale, and he almost cried out, "Brother, brother, I was wrong. Please be gentle with your feet. I was blind as a bat. I don't know the rules, Shen Yan exerted some force on Little Yellow Hair's foot, and Little Yellow Hair instantly began to cry. No, we didn't know the rules. We didn't know the rules. We will compensate. Shen Yan's foot did not loosen. You don't have to compensate me. We've made a deal. If you let me relax, I'll take care of you. He exerted some force on his foot, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Little Yellow Hair let out a shrill howl. At the same time, a thick stack of money was thrown at him. Little Yellow Hair broke out in a cold sweat as he looked at the departing figure as if he was looking at a demon. Chapter 9:12. When Shen Yan returned home, he saw a figure sitting in the living room. He subconsciously glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already 10:30 a.m. Why wasn't she asleep at this time? For a moment, he couldn't remember anything else. Shen Yan walked quickly to Gu Xingyin. Sister, why aren't you asleep yet? Gu Xingyin was half lying on the sofa, drowsy. She wasn't used to staying up late after a long period of time. Hearing Shen Yan's words, she forced her eyes open. I'm waiting for you to come home. However, the moment she saw Shen Yan, her drowsiness disappeared. There were bruises on his face, and even his lips were broken. She sat up immediately. Did you get into a fight? Shen Yan was stunned. Then he realized that she had seen the wound on his face. Then his memories came back to him, and he remembered why he was unhappy. He turned his head awkwardly and said, I met a few hooligans on the way. They wanted to extort me, so I fought with them. Gu Xingyin glared at him angrily. If they want money, just give it to them. What if they brought a knife? There's no need to put yourself in danger for a few dollars. Shen Yan didn't speak. Gu Xingyin was completely awake. She got up and said to Shen Yan, Go take a shower. I'll apply medicine for you after that. Shen Yan obediently went back to his room to take a shower. When he returned to his room, he realized that his gloomy mood had improved a lot. The anger and resentment in his heart had already calmed down when he saw his sister waiting for him on the sofa until midnight. It was always like this. His emotions were all easily controlled by her. Every word and action was heaven and hell. After taking a shower, Shen Yan went downstairs in his pajamas. Gu Xingyin was waiting there with the medical kit. Shen Yan couldn't help but say, Sister, I can do it myself. Go to sleep first. Otherwise, you'll have a headache tomorrow morning. Shen Yan was even more concerned about her health than Gu Xingyin herself. Gu Xingyin rolled her eyes at him. Don't talk. Can you heal the wounds on your body by yourself? She wasn't really a young lady who never left the house. Since Shen Yan's face had become like that, there must be more injuries on his body. Take off your clothes, she urged him. Shen Yan's body stiffened. This sentence was too easy to let one's imagination run wild. What's more, the person who said this was the person she wanted to embrace day and night. Seeing that Shen Yan didn't move for a long time, Gu Xingyin became anxious. Her thoughts were completely different from Shen Yan's. She thought that Shen Yan's injuries were too serious and he didn't dare to show her. What's wrong? Hurry up, aren't you afraid of disturbing my sleep? The sooner I finish, the sooner I can rest. Shen Yan came back to his senses and took off his pajamas without another word. The 16-year-old youth had a well-proportioned bone structure. His body was covered with a thin layer of muscle due to long-term training. The lines were smooth and beautiful. They were not overly exaggerated, but they did not make people overlook the strength contained in them. Shen Yan thought nervously, I wonder if sister will like it. However, it turned out that he was thinking too much. Gu Shengyin didn't pay attention to his figure at all. She didn't notice if he had chest muscles or abdominal muscles. Her attention was all attracted by the bruises on his fair skin. Chapter 9:13. Gu Shengyin looked at these scars and felt both angry and distressed. She pressed her fingers hard and was satisfied to hear Shenyan gasp in pain. Gu Shengyin snorted. Now you know it's painful? Do you think you're especially brave when you're fighting? She was really angry. From the day she adopted Shenyan, she had secretly sworn in her heart that she would never let him suffer again in this life. Now that she had finally raised him to be fair, fat, and healthy, he didn't cherish himself and went to fight with hooligans? Gu Shengyin did not hold back at all as he applied the ointment. When he came across the bruises, he deliberately rubbed them hard. It's good that you know it's painful. Let's see if you'll still be a hero next time. Shenyan felt pain and joy. Although the wounds on his body hurt, he missed the touch of his sister's cold hands on his skin even more. He could clearly feel the temperature of her fingers at such a close distance. This kind of feeling was really fascinating. Shen Yan thought to himself that it would be better if she applied the medicine a little slower. Unfortunately, although Gu Shengyin was angry, her movements were not slow. Soon, she stopped and let Shen Yan put on his clothes. Then, she applied the medicine on his face. The two of them were very close. As long as Shen Yan lowered his eyes, he could clearly see all the expressions on Gu Shengyin's face. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and a small shadow fell on her lower eyelids like a butterfly flapping its wings. Her lips, which were usually pale, were slightly pouted, as if waiting for someone to taste them. Shen Yan originally enjoyed this feeling, but soon he felt that this might not be a good thing. The other party was too close. Even her breathing was close. The other party's aura surrounded him. Shen Yan only felt a small flame rising from the inside of his body. The small flame burned brighter and brighter, causing his face to turn red, his breathing to become heavy, and his eyes to darken. At this distance, Shen Yan only needed to raise his hand to easily pull Gu Shengyin into his arms. He stared at her without blinking, as if he wanted to engrave this familiar face deep in his heart. Gu Shengyin was completely unaware of this. She was wholeheartedly applying medicine for the other party. Done. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief. She was finally done. At the same time, she felt a strong force on her waist and she fell into Shen Yan's arms. Shen Yan heaved a sigh of relief. It felt so good to hug her. He really couldn't hold back just now. Gu Shengyin felt that there was something wrong with this development. Nian. She called out hesitantly. Shen Yan really wanted to take this opportunity to confess to her directly. He told her of his desire for her, told her that he wanted to hold her, kiss her, possess her, and even do more intimate things. But he didn't dare. Thus, Shen Yan only rubbed her neck and said sullenly, "Sister, when you get married in the future, what will I do?" Was he acting coquettishly? Gu Shengyin came back to her senses and accepted the fact that this boy, who was a head taller than her, was acting coquettishly. How could she get married? No, it should be said, how could she marry someone else? Gu Shengyin deliberated over her words and replied, "What are you thinking about? Sister and Yan will always be together." Although he knew that she was comforting him, Shen Yan still jumped for joy. He smiled happily like a child who didn't know anything about the world. "Yes, sister and I will always be together." Chapter 9:14. From that day onwards, Gu Shengyin inexplicably felt that her little brother had become even more clingy to her. Not to mention school time, after school or on rest days, he would definitely follow her closely. He did not relax at all. What's going on? Gu Shengyin tried to flip through some books. With the college entrance examination approaching, the examinees were nervous and might often do things that were very different from usual. Gu Shengyin rubbed her chin. Is Xiaoyan too nervous? That day, she specially pulled Shen Yan aside for a heart-to-heart talk. "Xiaoyan, I realize that something's wrong with you recently. Are you relying on me too much?" Shen Yan was originally a little nervous. He thought that his crush had been discovered. In the end, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he realized that his sister had thought of something completely unrelated. Why would she think that he was nervous because of the college entrance examination? However, it was good for her to misunderstand. This way, he would have enough reason to stay by her side, right? Thus, the two of them had a harmonious conversation with different moods. Both of them felt that they had gained a lot. Shen Yan's mood improved for almost half a month, until that day. The college entrance examination was in half a month. Coincidentally, his sister's birthday was not long after the college entrance examination. He was shopping at the mall, wanting to prepare a birthday present for his sister. Then, he saw, his sister was shopping at a jewelry store with Qin Chuan. A woman and a man went to a jewelry store. What kind of relationship did they have to be in order to do this? Shen Yan felt that he couldn't even breathe properly. These beautiful days were like a perfect and fragile dream. Everything was just him deceiving himself. They would always be together. One day, she would have someone else she liked. She would get married and have another man to spend the rest of her life with. At the thought of this possibility, Shen Yan felt a beast stirring in his heart. It was tempting him and mocking him. Look, you're standing still. In the end, she has someone else by her side. In her heart, you will always be a younger brother who won't grow up. You'll never have a chance. His eyes reddened bit by bit. At the same time, in another environment. You must not tell Miao Miao. Qin Chuan was a little nervous. Gu Shengyin, who was pulled in as an advisor and a test subject, nodded. Don't worry. I won't tell her. She thought about it and said with a smile, Miao Miao will be overjoyed to receive this gift. Hearing this, Qin Chuan also smiled. In Shen Yan's eyes, the two of them were laughing and chatting. From time to time, they would compare the items in their hands. The two of them shopped in the shop for nearly an hour, while Shen Yan watched from outside for an hour. Until the two of them left. Shen Yan immediately walked into the shop and looked at the place where the two of them had stopped. With one look, he felt as if his heart had been frozen by ice. They were all rings. Shen Yan suddenly felt like crying. Not long ago, she had hugged him and said that the two of them would always be together, but in the blink of an eye, she had followed another man to choose a ring. Sir? The staff at the counter looked worriedly at the dispirited boy. The other party was young, but the clothes and watches on him were all branded. She didn't dare to be disrespectful. But, from the looks of it, was he heartbroken? Shen Yan came back to his senses. He wanted to smile, but he realized that he couldn't. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.